Welcome to Paranormal M, where the line between reality and mystery blurs. Subscribe now and turn on notifications to never miss a moment. The unknown is waiting to be explored. Wholesome haunting. I'm 18 years old. When I was 6, my dad died. He was an amazing dad, and when my siblings and I were babies, he was very protective. He was also in the military. And before he went on his last deployment, we made a Build-A-Bear, a customizable stuffed animal. When you squeezed the hand, it would play a recording of him singing "You Are My Sunshine," which he always sang to us at nighttime, or to calm one of us down. When my dad returned from his deployment, the song wouldn't play. He could squeeze all you want, and it just wouldn't. We thought it was just broken, because little kids do break things. Well, 2 weeks after my dad died, I fell down the stairs. From upstairs, you could hear my dad's recording play. It hadn't worked in the 2 years after he had returned. And it suddenly worked now. My mom, my sister, our brothers, all stunned, we tried to make it play again. Nothing. We thought it was just a fluke, some crazy coincidence. Well, my sister's boyfriend broke up with her next week. She came home crying. The moment she stepped through the front door, the bear goes off. It kept happening. When one of my brothers stubbed his toe, when my sister smacked herself in the head with the cabinet door. Right one. For years, every time one of us was upset, you would hear the bear. Stopped a couple of years ago. We figured that Dad decided that we were all teenagers now and didn't need his protection anymore. My sister didn't go to college because of her disability. She's taking some time off to heal and figure out her own path. I'm the second oldest. I just got my first college acceptance letter. I came in, tore the packaging open, and jumped for joy. We were all crowded around the kitchen when we heard it. The frickin' bear. Hadn't gone off in years. The White Surrey Apparition. A village's unseen visitor. In the early 1990s, in a quaint village nestled within Maharashtra, India, lived Rajesh, a diligent farmer dedicated to his land and family. His days were consumed by the relentless demands of agriculture, while the evenings were reserved for cherished moments with his wife Priya and their 2 young children. Life, though modest, was harmonious, until an encounter on a dusky evening set off a chain of events that would forever alter their existence. The unseen presence. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the fields, Rajesh began his journey home. The path, familiar yet eerie in the twilight, seemed to stretch endlessly. It was during the solitary walk that he noticed a figure by the roadside, a woman draped in a white saree. Her demeanor exuded distress. Concerned, Rajesh quickened his pace to offer assistance. But as he approached, the woman vanished into thin air, leaving him bewildered and unsettled. Upon reaching home, Rajesh recounted the perplexing incident to Priya. She listened intently, her brow furrowing with worry. In an attempt to soothe his unease, he suggested that perhaps fatigue had conjured the apparition. However, deep within, a gnawing sense of dread began to take root in Rajesh's mind. Escalating encounters. In the ensuing weeks, the family's once peaceful abode became a theater for inexplicable occurrences. Rajesh was frequently roused from sleep by faint whispers. His name carried on an unseen breeze. Certain corners of their home grew unnaturally cold, sending shivers down the spine of anyone who dared to enter. The children, the innocent and perceptive, spoke of shadowy figures lurking just beyond their vision, their playful laughter tinged with fear. The culmination of these events occurred one fateful night. As the family gathered for their evening meal, an oppressive silence enveloped the room. The air grew dense, the temperature plummeted, and the flickering oil lamp cast dancing shadows on the walls. The children whimpered, their eyes wide with terror, as an unseen force seemed to grip the household. Seeking counsel. Determined to protect his family and unravel the mystery that plagued them, Rajesh sought the wisdom of the village elder, Arjun, a man revered for his knowledge of local lore and spiritual matters. Arjun listened with a grave expression as Rajesh detailed the harrowing experiences. After a contemplative silence, Arjun spoke of a woman named Meera. She had met a tragic end near the very spot where Rajesh had first seen the apparition. Her untimely death, shrouded in sorrow, had left her spirit restless, wandering the earthly realm in search of solace. Need answers to smelling perfume. I'm back in my hometown for a bit after a long gap of 3 years. Met some old friends of mine for dinner at a little far-off place from my house. I went for dinner riding my bike instead of asking friends to pick me up. I live way off route for any of them to come pick me. I have my own transport for a change. Well, by the time we got done, it was about 1:30. I had a long ride since I live so far. Also, it'll be worthwhile to mention that these are all village roads. There's literally no traffic or people on the street at this time. I started my bike, put some music, and began the ride. I encountered no one on my way except for the occasional vehicle passing by and some stray animals. It was not eerie, and I didn't feel weird at all for 80% of the ride up until I turned the corner to where my street starts. As I was turning, I got a strong scent of perfume, even though there was not a soul there. Couldn't have been my perfume since I use a masculine scent, if this was a feminine, flowery scent. As I was pondering while riding, I got a whiff of the same perfume again, though this time it was a bit subtle. Again, no living being is in sight. There were no houses nearby to explain the presence of perfume suddenly, especially in an environment which smelt like dust and air for the most part. I felt extremely uncomfortable. This was immediately. I just sped up a bit so I could get home quickly. I became extremely uneasy until I saw my house and rushed through the front door. Please, can someone tell me if this has any meaning or significance? Why did I smell perfume randomly, and that too on the same stretch of the ride? I do like when it smells like air, wherever I am. Apparition at La Salette. So I know anyone can just spit out a story about what they've seen. So I need to preface this with something important. Up until 5 months ago, I was a hardcore skeptic and atheist. The supernatural or spiritual realms weren't something I thought of. When I was much, much younger, about 20 years ago, I did believe in this stuff until I started going down the trail of YouTube skeptic and atheist videos. I determined this stuff wasn't real, and nobody had solid evidence of it. However, for some reason, 5 months ago I started having a spiritual awakening. And to explain my experience is impossible, because I can't quite put it into words, but I'll try my best. About right at the beginning of August of this year, I did something that apparently a lot of people have to do with guidance or teaching. I looked deep inside myself, started revealing myself of my sins. I recognized all of my bad habits and behaviors. I instantly in my heart and mind swore that whatever else came my way in life, I'd just accept it, because anything that's happening to me, I did to myself. Anything I worry about, I worry myself. In psychology, this is just CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And that's the path I was on. I've had a therapist for 4 years now. I've been actively working on retraining my brain, so to speak, to just stop worrying. I suffer from extreme anxiety, or at least I did. And something just happened. I started to feel it like I awoke to another level of consciousness. For the rest of August, it was strong. I was seeing things that were real, but had meaning to me. Well, that's good. I was fascinated and spent most of my time researching things that would pop into my head. I was researching religions, but not the religions themselves. I could understand the religions now, like all of them. Buddhism, Christianity, all of it. Thought it was fascinating. And no part of this journey did I expect anything that I had seen or experienced. Somehow, my journey led me to the national shrine of La Salette at night. When I was a child, my grandmother would have figures from La Salette, and I believe I was taken there a few times as a child. I walked there in the middle of a summer's night, just to enjoy the shrine. It's a beautiful location. People there are insanely kind. I was exploring the rosary, and around the giant rosary, there's these plaques that tell the story of Christ. I was following them along, just kind of looking and enjoying the night, and then I saw it. A person in a white robe walked in front of me, about 40 feet away from where I was standing. It just walked, but also sort of glided. This is not something I was expecting, and I knew if I didn't try to figure it out if it was a person or not, I'd regret it, so I followed the figure. However, when I tried to follow it, it would vanish. Then the figure would just be walking in the complete opposite direction. I started walking, trying to cut the figure off, thinking it was just a person. But when I tried to get a good fix on the area and where they could be, they were in a different location far away. It was as if somebody was purposely just appearing out of nowhere and vanishing, then reappearing in a different spot. However, the person looked so real. The weird thing is, the figure emitted light in a sense. Not bright light, but when I looked at the figure, it could be seen in the dark without having shadow cast upon it or having light really emit from it. It was just there, as if someone superimposed a figure, like in a movie. However, it was the most surreal experience I've ever had. I didn't think to take out a phone and capture it. It just appeared and vanished too frequently, and I was in awe and trying to prove it was a person instead of an apparition. I know this is ghost stories, but I call it an apparition because it didn't seem like a ghost at all. It felt like a benevolent figure that appeared there just to show me a bit of the spiritual. I've had other experiences that proved my spiritual awakening, but this was the thing that stood out to me the most. But also, I've accepted it as commonplace. It wasn't spooky or scary. It was actually kind of reassuring. It was like something was trying to show me that, yes, the spiritual exists, and to continue on the path of exploring religion and the spiritual. A lot of weird stuff from August has faded after the month was over, but in my head all of this stuff happened very clearly, and, well, in reality. I'm not sure if this helps anyone, or is interesting to this forum, but I feel like explaining that these things are real, and actually do happen. The only other plausible explanation is that somebody likes to dress in a white robe at midnight and play pranks on people. However, it's absurd since nobody is really there at 12 at midnight except this homeless lady with her bicycle. She didn't wear anything white, so I know it wasn't her. Story about me and paranormal activity as a kid. When I was younger, I was told that I attract paranormal activities or something like that. The story my mom told me that confused me was when I was around 4. I was in the living room when my mom came in and saw her child crying, pointing to the window. Of course, she checked and nothing was there, and when she asked what was wrong, I guess I stated, "Mom, I saw a man in the window." I stated that he was pale and tall and pointy. Like any mother, not in some horror movie, she took me and ran outside and drove away. I have no memories of that, but I do one memory of my late Grammy's house. I was around 6 and I was playing with this girl in my Grammy's room, and of course my Grammy was confused, so she called me to come into the living room. She asked me, "What are you doing in there?" I stated I'm playing with this girl who's wearing something that my aunt was wearing. My Grammy's sister who was over her house. My aunt told me to tell the girl to go to her grandma, and I told the girl who said her grandma's dead. So my aunt then said to tell her to go to heaven with her grandma. So I told the girl that, and she started walking up clouds of stairs toward a bright light. I don't remember anybody who looked like that girl in real life close to me or remember seeing her face, so I'm not sure if that's a dream or not. Another story about my mother's sister, I'll call her my aunt, and she was 4 and she was in a corner looking at a wall, rocking back and forth, mumbling in Portuguese. None of my family on my mom's side, she knows, speaks Portuguese at all. And when they turned around to see what was going on, Aunt was sleeping. I thought my dad was home. I was 17 at the time, and my dad, he had got a new girlfriend. He would sleep at her house often. I've always been a little paranoid when home alone, so I always locked my door when I was in my room. I had gone to bed and locked my door and was laying in bed watching TikTok. I had forgot to turn off the hallway light, and through my door I could see the light, I should say. Then out of nowhere, I heard somebody walking up the stairs, and my stairs are loud, I should say. I sat up in bed so I could see through the crack in my door, and it was the most silent I've been in my life, and I listened. It walked very slow up the stairs, but I first thought it was my dad, but it was weird how I didn't hear the front door close. It then walked down my hallway. I could see as the walking sounds passed my room. I couldn't see the light through the crack of my door, and the light I could see before was gone. It was all black. When it went into one of the empty rooms beside my room and the light in the hallway returned, it then walked around a bit in the room. It then walked to my door. It didn't press down the handle, but just kind of shook it a little bit so the door moved. I was shitting my pants at this point, and then I heard it walk down the hallway again. Not the stairs. Everything just became quiet again. My neighborhood ghost attached itself to me. So, backstory before my neighborhood was built, there's a family that lived in the main house in a section of my neighborhood. They had a daughter who died in the property before it was turned into a neighborhood. When I was growing up, I was always terrified to sleep into my room. I always felt like someone was watching me. I used to be so scared I would sometimes sleep in my parents' room on their floor. When I was 9 or 10, I was sleeping on their bedroom floor and I randomly woke up and saw a little girl cuddling my mom with a doll. The doll was an old-timey looking glass doll, identical to the one that we'd have in our basement. She was just staring right at me. My mom was sleeping on her side and was facing me. It looked like the girl's was just spooning her. I obviously woke up my mom and screamed, but no one was there, and my parents said it was probably just my imagination. Jumping a little in time here, after that, I never saw the little girl again. But as I got older, maybe 16 or 17, I noticed my stuff would go missing. For example, I had an A necklace that I loved, and one night I took it off and woke up and it was gone. I asked my mom if she took it or had seen it. She said no, so I assumed I misplaced it. Well, 6 months later, the same necklace was placed perfectly in my carpet. I asked my mom if she'd put it there, and she told me that she hadn't seen that necklace in 6 months. Happened again my freshman year of college. Came back home from break and had my mom with my favorite jersey. After she washed it, and she said that she put it on my bed when I looked and it was just gone. A year later, it was hanging in my closet like it had before the whole time. But I know for a fact no one in my family had touched it or seen it in at least a year. My TV would turn on to random channels even through the remote, or even though the remote was on a shelf next to my bed. Lights turning on and off. There were more things that happened, and I can talk about them later, but nobody else in the family experienced stuff. I've talked to a lot of other people in my neighborhood who've heard a little girl giggling or crying in footsteps that sounded like a child. They all said it wasn't their child, or they don't have any. That was the only things my neighbors had really experienced. Only small things that they can brush off. I don't know why, though, that this ghost has attached herself to me. No one else has experienced anything close to what I had. If anybody has any idea on what that would be, it would be great. I think I saw something in my dorm. So when my college got released for break, I had to stay a while longer because my dad was waiting for an off day to come get me. So I stayed an extra 2 or 3 days. So the night before my dad came to get me, I decided to do some laundry. It was late, roughly 10 p.m. when I started, and granted I'm pretty much alone in this building beside a few other people. It is everyone's finals were over now, so I thought I'd have the laundry room to myself. For future reference, my dorm was a hotel once. It got repurposed as a dorm, like it looks completely different other than the general style of the building. One portion looks like a motel and the other looks like a regular hotel. So, around midnight, exactly when I went to the communal laundry room to check to see if my laundry was dry, it wasn't. So I started it back up and left the laundry room. So the two buildings sit parallel to each other. And as I'm walking down the hall of the motel building, I can see inside some of the rooms of the hotel one. So there's 2 beds in one of the rooms. One of the beds is empty and the mattress is propped up against the wall. Now the other bed has sheets, so the room isn't completely empty. But as I'm looking into the room, I see a boy sitting on where the empty bed is supposed to be. He's wearing all black basketball shorts, black hoodie, and he's swinging his legs back and forth. He looked too young to be in a dorm. His head is down, so I can't see his face, and I'm thinking that the girl in that room just has a guest. But then, I realized that the springs are too wide for somebody to sit on it. The mattress is behind him on the wall. So, as I'm looking, I get this really odd feeling. Dread, almost. A sad feeling, too. I look down and I keep telling myself to not pay attention to it. I keep walking, but when I look back up, he's gone. There's nothing in the room now, and I remember getting the chills, and once I get back up to my room, I sat down for a minute and just kind of stared into space. Whatever I saw, I keep thinking about it. Weirdness on the road. It's been 20 years since this experience, and it's only really come back to me because it was the 20th anniversary get-together. There's a 6-lane highway between Kuwait and Iraq. It's officially known as Highway 80. It runs from Kuwait City to the border of Safwan in Iraq and then on the Iraq city of Basra. The road was used by Iraqi armored divisions in the 1990 invasion of Kuwait. It was repaired after the Gulf War, and it was used by the U.S. and British forces in the initial stages of the 2003 invasion of Iraq. During the Persian Gulf War, American, Canadian, British, and French aircraft and ground forces attacked retreating Iraqi military personnel attempting to leave Kuwait on the night of February 26, 1991. This resulted in the destruction of hundreds of vehicles and the deaths of many of their occupants. Between maybe 1,400 and 2,000 vehicles were hit or abandoned on the main Highway 80 north of Al-Jara. Some of the vehicles were still in the desert. You could still find bits of equipment like webbing and helmets out in the sand. There was always a weird feeling on that road at night. On one evening, we were in the last packet of the convoy heading to Basra. We had the recovery vehicles, and we were tasked with the recovery of, an apparent broken-down vehicle. We rolled up to the site of the breakdown. As the recovery team started work, we put out a security cordon. Night vision can really mess up your depth perception. Sometimes, really, but you could make out what looked like figures moving in the desert just beyond the cordon. In usual fashion, a squad was sent out to see what exactly was happening, and if it was a possible threat. So, off the 4 of us went into the dark desert. Over the PRR, personal radio, we got told to stop as we were right on top of where the suspected people had been seen. There was nothing that we could see, so we carried out our 5 and 20 checks. Beneath the sand, we discovered a pile of rags and 3 helmets. Having established there was no apparent threat, we returned back to the cordon. But over the next 30 or 40 minutes as we watched out into the desert, there were a lot of times that it looked like there were solid figures moving around in the perimeter. Now, if this was a one-off event, I would have put it down to lack of sleep. Maybe too much caffeine or just using the night vision. But over the years, since others from different units and who'd worked in that area at different times have talked about the figures in the desert that always seemed to be moving around but could never be found. On the night of February 26, 1991, for the next 10 hours, scores of U.S. Marine and U.S. Air Force and U.S. Navy aircraft from the USS Ranger, CV-CVA-61, attacked the convoy, using a variety of weapons. Vehicles surviving the air attacks were later engaged by arriving coalition ground units, while most of the vehicles that managed to evade the traffic jam and continued to drive on the road to the north were targeted individually. The road bottlenecked near the Mutla Ridge police station. It was reduced to a long, uninterrupted line of more than 300 stuck and abandoned vehicles, sometimes called the Mile of Death. The wreckage found on the highway consisted of at least 28 tanks and other armored vehicles, with many more commandeering civilian cars and buses filled with stolen Kuwaiti property. The death toll from the attack remains unknown. British journalist Robert Fisk said, "Lost count of the Iraqi corpses crammed into the smoldering wreckage or slumped face down in the sand. That was at the main site. Saw hundreds of corpses strewn up the road all the way to the Iraqi border." American journalist Bob Drogan reported seeing, as he put it, scores of dead soldiers, and as he put it, in and around the vehicles, mangled and bloated in the drifting desert sands. A 2003 study by the Project Defense Alternatives, the PDA, estimated fewer than 10,000 people rode in the cut-off main caravan, but when the bombing started, mostly simply left their vehicles to escape through the desert or into the nearby swamps where some died from their wounds. I moved out, and now I'm terrified. I don't even know where to start. I moved out of my parents' house 2 weeks ago, thinking I'd finally have some freedom and space of my own. At first, it was exciting. Decorating and staying up late, no rules. But now, I wish I never left. I don't feel safe here. I don't feel alone. It started small. I'd put my keys in the counter only to find them on the floor or in the fridge. Thought it was just me being forgetful, but then it got worse. One night I came home and all the cabinets in my kitchen were open. Every single one. I know I didn't leave them like that. Then a few nights ago, I woke up and noticed my closet door was open. I never leave it open, and I swear I shut it before bed. As I stared at the dark space inside, I heard it. Soft, raspy breathing. It was so faint it couldn't have been my imagination. Perhaps it could have, but it wasn't. I pulled the covers over my head and I stayed like that until morning. The next night I woke up to a noise underneath my bed. At first it was a low creaking, like the wood shifting. But then it escalated, a scream, choked, gurgling, and desperate. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make me freeze. I couldn't move, I couldn't even breathe. When I finally got the courage to grab my phone and turn on the flashlight, there's nothing under there. But the shadows are the worst. At night I'll wake up and see someone in the doorway, just standing there, not moving, not blinking. First time I thought it was a trick of the light, but it's happening every night since. Sometimes they're closer, like they're stepping into my room. Can't tell if they're real or if I'm going insane. Last night I locked my door before bed, and when I woke up the lock was broken. The door was wide open, and there were faint wet footprints leading into my room, stopping next to my bed. This morning, I found something on my bathroom sink. A hairbrush. Old, cracked, with hair still tangled in it. It's not mine. I don't even know a hairbrush like that. When I touched it, it felt damp, like it had been pulled from somewhere wet. I threw it out, but an hour later it was back on the sink. Started hearing whispers when I'm home alone. Can't make out what they're saying, but it's like they're coming from the walls just low enough to drive me crazy. I can't eat, I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I feel like someone's watching me. I don't know what to do. Can't stay here, but where can I go? My parents won't believe me. They'll say I'm imagining it or being dramatic. But I know it's happening. There's something here with me. Something that doesn't want me to leave. Something that wants me to stay. And every night it feels like it's getting closer. It's happening today. I don't even know why I'm writing this. Maybe it's to make sense of things, or maybe it's just because I need someone, anyone, to know what's happening to me. Since this morning, everything's spiraling out of control. I thought staying out of the apartment would help, but no matter where I go, it feels like it follows me. I woke up early at a friend's house, hoping for some peace. I didn't tell them what's going on. I didn't want to sound insane. But when I opened my eyes, their cat was sitting in the doorway of the guest room, staring at me. Its fur was matted and wet, even though my friend swore it hadn't been outside. Then I noticed a faint, damp footprint next to the bed. I decided to head home to grab some clothes and figure out my next move. But as soon as I stepped into the apartment, the air felt heavier. It was hard to my chest, and the moment I walked into the bathroom, I saw the mirror fogged up. It was as though somebody had just showered, even though I hadn't been home. Written in the condensation were 3 words: "Don't fight it." Can't bring myself to sleep. The whispers have grown louder throughout the day, almost like they're trying to form words. I don't recognize the language, but it's deep and guttural, like something choking on the sounds. It all came to a head a couple of hours ago. I heard water dripping and thought it was the kitchen sink, but when I walked down the hall, I saw a puddle forming. It led right to my bedroom. The bed was completely soaked, sheets, mattress, everything. And in the middle of it was the hairbrush, the same one I threw away twice. I don't know how it keeps coming back. I don't know how any of this is happening. I've kept all the lights on since. They all started flickering. My phone battery drains faster than it should, and no matter how many times I check the time, it's never, changing. I called my parents earlier today, desperate for help. The call dropped midway through. When I checked my phone, the last call wasn't to them. It was to an unknown number. I don't remember dialing it. I don't even know how long the call lasted. Right now, I'm sitting in my car writing this. I can't go back inside, but I can't stay out here much longer either. Every time I look up at the window, I see the shadow of someone standing there, watching me, waiting. Something's going to happen tonight. I don't know what, but I can feel it. Whatever this is, it doesn't want me to leave. I'm not sure I'll survive if I try. If you don't hear from me again, please just don't come looking for me. Whatever this thing is not just haunting me anymore. It's taking me. Today. Ghostly experiences. All 5 of these experiences have happened in the same location: Comish Hall, Albion, and Idaho. Background. In my local area, we have a series of haunted mansions. They were built out of an old teacher's school when people were moving across the country to live out west. The rest of the campus had been restored to be homes and condos, I believe. The 4 that have not been touched outside of some outdated wiring and reinforced spots are left for the public during the October to walk through. 3 of the buildings are set up as a scare attraction, while 1 of them is left empty for self-guided exploration. I've had weird experiences in this building's vicinity. First encounter. The first time I'd ever gone was me, my parents, and a friend. We were with her brother and their parents. She was a really big scaredy cat toward anything horror. Through the attraction houses, she had been oddly calm and excited to go through everything. However, when we got to this building, we hadn't even walked up the steps before she had started to bawl her eyes out and scream like something was attacking her. Our moms and her brother had opted to stay outside and take care of her while our dads and I went and explored. We had no other strange things happen in the building, but when we asked her about the meltdown in the car on our way home, she didn't remember ever doing such a thing. Was genuinely really mad at us for going without her into the building. A few months later, we stopped talking. No contact. It was out of the blue. Second encounter. This happened a few years later in the same area with a different friend. We did manage to go into the building, and all the photos we took this time have acted weird. I would genuinely love more than anything to share them, but the thing that happens is the photos I took refuse to be uploaded anywhere. Well, anywhere but my Snapchat account. I've tried to save one particular photo to my actual camera roll, and it will vanish after a few weeks, or if I'm lucky, months. In all all of these photos, there's a weird film grain. It's kind of over each one, like the quality of my camera's been disintegrated, which is weird because I took the photos on my phone. In one set of photos taken from 3 different phones of my father, there's this weird fleshy blob in it. The way it looked would suggest a hand moving, but my dad's hands were in his pocket and around the guide, so they were making sure that we got out of the basement safely. The guide's hands were covered by sleeves. Also, a few months later, this friend also left my life. We no longer speak to each other either. Third encounter, the longest one. This one, I don't know what to make of this because it still haunts me. This time I had multiple experiences, not that I witnessed, but that I was a part of. Both this friend and I are very big into spiritual things, and the use of tarot crystals and things of that nature. We had black tourmaline with us, and that was on this one trip. But now I'm fully aware of how stories can be manipulated because the mind plays tricks on people, but I've never seen an amethyst act like a magnet. One of our first encounters, I had something trying to force my glasses off my face. It was pushing them through my head from the left, and my friend was experiencing the same thing. That was after a large crowd of people had walked by the room that we were in. This energy felt violent, and like the crowd made it mad. We had at one point labeled this entity the toddler, as the pain from our glasses felt like a tantrum. Later on, in a different room, there was this strong masculine presence that felt like it just wanted to exist with us. I do 100% believe I tried to attach itself to my friend at one point and failed or only partially succeeded and grabbed his hand. Later on in this building, we both felt this insanely strong pull to find a woman who was on the 2nd floor. Unfortunately for us, the stairs at this time were blocked off for fear of the roof collapsing. We tried to find a room below this, and this feeling, we couldn't do so. Eventually, we ran into a cast member whose job is to guide people out of the building. We ended up talking with him about what we had experienced and what questions that we asked. He mentioned that at one point there was a chair in this old meat locker in this dormitory that had been bent to hell. That's a deep bend. There was no real explanations as to why it suddenly gave out, so we went to check it out and brought the cast member with us. My friend then points out that there's a very faint, separate masculine energy that's following this cast member. He ends up communicating with this energy and with the cast member using the amethyst pendulum that he had brought. The cast member leaves, and suddenly, the pendulum refuses to move. Cannot be bothered to answer any questions, so he hands it to me. The second it's in my hands, we both feel the woman that we've been looking for. However, her energy is still on the 2nd floor, like she's stuck. But she can now communicate because of where we are at. At about halfway through this encounter, we had gathered a small crowd, and the only request that we had was that there was no light on or my friend because we didn't want to risk weird shadows. So we had one light facing away from us, and the area I sat in was dark. I had wrapped my arms up in the broken chair so that my movement wouldn't affect the pendulum. The whole time, if anybody asked her a question, she refused to answer unless it was my voice speaking to her. Not yours. Like the pendulum went scarily still, like something was refusing to let my hand shake or let the crystal swing. The one time she responded to a person that wasn't me was when somebody asked to take a photo of the room, and I, like 10 other people, watched the pendulum hold at this established no. There was no swing. My arm didn't move, and the chain was diagonal as the tip of the pendulum pointed to no. Eventually, I got a phone call from my mother saying that we needed to leave, and I watched this pendulum start to violently swing towards the no. Like my presence was needed, and the energy my friend and I felt was a wave of anger toward my mother because I was being taken away. I never once felt as if I was in danger up until that point. I really was feeling safe before, like I was in an environment I had spent my life in. Eventually, I convinced her to let me go and that I'd come back. When we were leaving, the person who asked to take the photo informed me that she had seen the shadow of a woman standing behind where I sat leaning over my form, like she was looking at what I was doing. End quote. When we went to leave this town to drive home, I felt this insane need to go back, like she was trying to have me go back to her and keep talking to her. I know she's still there and didn't follow me because the need died when I get back to my hometown. Well, turns out that after a few months again, this friend and I no longer talk. Fourth encounter. I took my ex-roommate and rented every single room that I'd previously had an experience in. They got so violently ill that they couldn't even go back near the room on the second floor. That's the one where I thought my ghostly shadow resided in, or the basement meat locker I'd spoken to her in. When my ex-roommate left, I felt a strange sense of calm, like danger had been removed from my area. I couldn't find her presence or anyone else's presence. Turns out this ex-roommate, for reasons I can't talk about, decided to leave my life in a very violent and traumatic way. Continues to attempt making my life hell. Last encounter. This past October, I took my roommate and a friend of mine there. The grounds were so calm and safe that, other than a few, very gentle pulls to specific places, nothing happened. There were no feelings of I needed to find something or someone, and I didn't have any crystals on me. Didn't have my pendulum. It was just me throughout the experience, and I felt safe enough to unmasked. And to be my actual self, and watch these two people be okay with that. Granted, my roommate is moving out, but that's because our apartment has no internet. On our drive home, both of these people fell asleep in the car while I was driving home, and something that I know only happens if you feel safe enough to do so. One of my other friends has a very similar thing happen. A friend they took, and no longer friends with after meeting a strong feminine entity. My thoughts are with all of these experiences is that for some reason, something or someone in that house was trying to protect me. And then when the threat was gone, the need for me to sense them wasn't there anymore. If people stop talking to you, address all possibilities. Door opening and closing by itself. I was about 9 years old, and I was in bed just laying there when I see my bedroom door slowly start to open. I saw a yellow light, like maybe the hall light was on. I called out to it, "Hello?" No reply. Then I started to think it was my sister playing a prank on me, so I said my sister's name, but I'm not going to tell you the name. "I know you're just playing a prank on me." No reply, and then it slowly closed. The thing that also was really weird is that it was silent when it opened and closed. It was odd because at the time I had a mirror that hung in the door that made a horrific noise every time you opened and closed the door. I was very religious at the time, and I thought, did I get visited by an angel? I get up out of bed and open the door. It's completely pitch black. I go downstairs and my sister was on her computer. It looked like she had been there for a while. I asked her, "Did you just come upstairs and open my door?" She said no. I said, "Are you sure?" She said no. She had been down there on her computer. I asked where Mom and Dad were, and she said that they were in bed hours ago. The next morning, I asked my parents, and they said that they never went up there. And honestly, if it was them, why wouldn't they say anything back to me at the time? I really believed it was an angel or something that checked in on me, or maybe somebody who had passed. I prayed a lot for signs as a child, and maybe I got one. But as I grew up, I started to be really skeptical. But I think back to that moment. What really happened that night? I need to wash my eyes. I was with a few friends, about 8 people. It was late one night, and we had just gotten done swimming at a quarry in southern Indiana. Well, needless to say, we all got bored after it hit nightfall. All decided to go somewhere haunted and creepy. My girlfriend and I had just gotten some paranormal equipment past Christmas, or rather, this past Christmas. And luckily, I had it in the car already. We first hit up Tunnelton's Big Tunnel, but decided to go somewhere else due to the fact that it isn't that scary when you have a big group. We heard about a cemetery near Story, Indiana, and decided to go there. After a bit of driving down gravel roads for like a few miles, we finally found it. Deep in the middle of the woods, my headlights illuminated the Elkinsville Cemetery. It lit up the sign on the side that was once a gravel road and is now a dirt path. We hop out of the car and make sure to be respectful as the grave as possible, and we weave to the very back end of the cemetery. We sit there doing the Estes method, or Estes method sessions. I know I should know how to pronounce that, but I don't. We weren't having any luck, even with the EMF reader, no activity at all. After a bit, we started finding peace in the silence. Cemeteries didn't really creep us out, but loved the aesthetic of it. I started to stray away from the group because I thought I heard something in the woods. Wanted to get a clearer sound without interrupting conversation. Then I heard it. What sounded to be laughter coming from the woods. Sounded like a pack of hyenas. I went back to the group and asked them to listen as to assure that I'm not insane, but just then, I realized that the laughter not only didn't sound like a pack anymore, but it was also closer. I shined my flashlight everywhere, the tree line, the shelter behind us, the tree and the bush in the middle of the cemetery. I was looking for answers. We all jumped up and ran to the car. Never had any issues starting the car ever since I purchased it a few years ago, but suddenly it didn't want to turn over. Eventually it would start, and my headlights shined right into the tree with the bush in the middle of the cemetery. Right there in the middle of the bush was a pair of eyes looking right at us. I then see whatever it was take off on all fours toward the tree line behind us. I then whipped the car around and not lose track of it, but to our horror, what appeared to be an animal with fur crawling on all fours not even a second ago was now walking on its back legs with no fur into the woods. I was too in shock to move until my girlfriend grabbed me and shouted, "Drive!" at me, which I proceeded to floor it out of there. Couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched the whole way out of the woods, and to this day, haven't been able to find any animal that would be able to do that in southern Indiana. Ghost that watched me while I was a child. I'd like to start by stating that all of my family members have seen somewhat similar things, and or different things than what I've seen. I've also had strange events happen in all the houses that we've lived in. The context to my family before I get into this is that I was around 4 or 6 in these events. And I have a brother or sister, and my parents lived with my grandparents on my dad's side. One of the earliest memories I have was living in this fairly large house at the time. It was a nice house, a bit of context on the layout. You walked through the front door and you had a small connector to the guest bathroom. And a garage to your right, and as you walk up the landing, it was a platform that had a staircase to your right and a hallway leading into a dining room in your left, which I used as a playroom. Small connector, A foyer, perhaps. If you continued forward, you had the top of the basement steps, which had a half wall on the side closest to the landing, and then a couple inches before the living room if you went forward. The living room was pretty large. It also had the kitchen and an area where we had the kitchen table. I was playing at the end of the living room one day, furthest away from the steps, when it was just me and my mom home, and I didn't have school yet. Everyone else was at work or just gone. We had a TV at the end of the living room, which was just off at the time, and I was playing with my cars before I noticed that in the reflection of the TV, I saw a weird, tall figure at the top of the steps. I was very puzzled, so I turned around and looked, and I saw a man without a face that was tall, wore a suit and a top hat. I always described the man as having no face because it was a weird, fuzzy, transparent void, if that makes sense. I proceeded to stare at the figure for a while before I turned back looking at the TV, hoping it would go away, and I saw that the reflection was gone. I sat there puzzled for a moment before I ran to go tell my mom in the bathroom upstairs. I had to pass right when he was standing, and I saw him so he could assume little me was terrified to all hell. The second encounter that I remember about was this man, this man that we were just talking about, which sounds a little bit like me in high school, but me and my sister were playing in the landing near the front door. The door had glass that was fully visible, but you can kind of see through it. Anyways, it was late at night, and one night everybody was home, but me and my sister were the only ones downstairs. We were, playing with different toys and stuff, and all of a sudden I see a man in a suit at the door outside. Now, like earlier, I couldn't see the face of him, but he was wearing the same suit this time, and his skin was grayish. But still, you couldn't see it, so I called it a wolf man in a suit just because the skin was gray. Third encounter, I don't actually remember it, but it was multiple and just put into one because, like I said, I can't remember. Anyways, my family members told me about the experience during this time, and I used to keep a book to try to draw these ghosts I saw. That's my dog. But they told me that I would talk about the man in the suit with the top hat in my playroom, and that he would always watch me. I always stated that the man was outside my windows watching me too. Overall, these are just some of the things that I've seen, and I'm now 18, but I have seen a decent amount of things, and I'd like to know if anybody else has anything or experiences that are similar or anything. I have tried seeing the history of deaths and etc. to see if I could find something, but couldn't. The only known thing to me is the house was burned down at one point, but they rebuilt it. I do have some more stories from this house that get a bit weirder, but if anybody wants to hear about them or share a story, well, feel free. Weird events that my family experienced at my childhood house. These encounters do take place in the same house, but they're all from my family as they've seen different things than what I have. More context to my house is that we have a really big backyard. It was divided by a creek with a small bridge over it. Anyways, the creek always gave everyone in my house a weird vibe. So one day, my mom was taking photos. She had taken one of the creek, and in the photo, you could see all these weird, transparent figures standing around the creek in an old-timey clothing and hats. It's like what you would see when America was first being built. My mom and Grandma were working one day in the backyard. It was past the bridge where we had a shed fireplace and a playground. And all of a sudden, they had heard a noise over by the bridge, and when they turned to look, it was a little boy in a Confederate uniform. Not sure what happened after, if he disappeared or went somewhere, but that's what I'm able to recall from when we exchanged the story. In 2011, my grandpa had died a day after my birthday. So in my house upstairs, the layout was weird. It had 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. And in my brother's room, there was a staircase where it led upstairs to a master bedroom and master bath where my grandparents stayed. It had a door at the top of the stairs, which was usually shut. Not exactly sure of the context of all, but I was home beside my brother at the time, which was addicted to Halo at the time, and he was playing, loading into a match when suddenly his scream turned black, and in the reflection he had seen our grandpa walking from the stairs to his door. Then all of a sudden he turned back to see no one there. Then the door suddenly just opens, but no one is visually there, and it freaked my brother out. The final encounter in this house was before we moved out, and, well, my parents had just passed away. So we're gonna downgrade, so we were packing, and I'm standing outside the garage with my uncle and grandma and my aunt. They were inside the house shredding old papers. That's when I heard in my ear my name getting called. But it was like somebody was screaming my name calmly, if that makes sense. It was my mother's voice, and I asked my uncle or grandma if they heard anything or had called my name, and they both said no. Went to ask my aunt, and she had also said no. These are all the main encounters of what happened at the house now, and there's been times where you felt like you're being watched in the basement or in the kitchen late at night. The house just had a really weird vibe to it. After we moved, there was some other incidents that had happened. And one that just happened on Christmas Day that was pretty recent, so I can make another post explaining the stories in the past 2 houses that I've lived in. I was 6 when my parents had passed away. I woke up one morning from my grandma's room and went into my brother's room to ask him to walk down, and he said, 1 minute, because he was in a Halo match. I then heard somebody walking behind me as I started walking down the stairs, so I thought my brother was with me. Once I got to the bottom, though, I walked where the half wall to the top of the basement stairs were, and my grandma said good morning to me from the living room, because you can see into from where I was standing and vice versa. Anyways, I turned around to tell my brother thank you, and then nobody was there, but I had heard someone behind me the whole time, and my grandma later said that she did see someone behind me, but it was a tall, dark shadow. We think that it was my dad watching over me, or the tall figure who watched me, who I mentioned in my previous post of the ghost that watched me when I was a child. After the passing of my parents, my grandma had taken me and my siblings that we had to downgrade to a townhouse. We were there for 6 years total. After we had first moved in, we never really had anything happen. But after a while of living there, it started with the smell of my dad's cologne that would randomly be in the house. None of my siblings owned it nor used cologne at the time. It was mainly in the hallways upstairs. But sometimes, you'd be downstairs, but it was very rare. You'd just be sitting there, and then the scent hits your nose out of nowhere. The second incident that happened didn't happen to me, but to my brother and my sister and their partners. They were all down in the kitchen one night, and me and my grandma were asleep. They were playing the game of life at the kitchen table. Nice. Then all of a sudden, a basketball in the corner of the room that they weren't near started bouncing on a pile of some random things in the corner. The many years we lived there, the basketballs never moved, not even an inch. This story took place around 2018 after my great-grandmother passed. So my family all has their different beliefs on who it was. The final incident from this house was my sister's boyfriend, who was a long family friend and had come over, and me, him, and my brother were close. So we're all talking before we headed upstairs. As you walked upstairs, you have a wall in front of you with a dresser. And this will be important later. To your immediate right, there was me and my brother's bathroom, and in the corner to the left of that was me and his room. My door was on the left, his was on the right. To the right, when you walk upstairs, was a small walkway with a half wall. You looked onto the stairs, but if you continued, you had my grandma's room and her bathroom. After we headed upstairs, my sister went to take a shower to my grandma's room before we even got up there. Me and her boyfriend went to my room because I was going to show him some Pokemon card pulls I had gotten recently. My brother was walking to his room. He walked into his room first, shut the door, then we did soon after. As soon as the door had shut, we heard a loud thud on the door. Me and my sister's boyfriend looked at each other. Then I go to open my door, and my brother just opened his as I did. We noticed that her cabinet on the walkway to her grandma's room is wide open. All the stuff in the dresser at the top of the steps are knocked off. There was hockey pucks and pictures and some fossils on the dresser. We then looked down to see what a hockey puck was thrown at. It was at my brother's door and had left a dent into it. My grandma was getting old at the time and wasn't able to run up and down the stairs after doing something like that, and my sister was already in the shower, like we had mentioned. We would have heard her running since the floorboard creaked near the cabinet. After that, we didn't have anything else happen in that house. Still creepy to think about. We moved into a new house in 2018 and have had some encounters, but nothing much. But I'll make a post soon enough about the events, considering I've had a lot of experiences for some reason. Let's throw some commas around. I've had a lot of experiences for some reason. I also have had a lot more when my family members from my first house that I was too young to remember. Something eerie keeps happening in my flat. I first remember visiting this flat when it was my nan and my granddad living here. I started visiting every weekend due to me needing a break because of my autism. I remember sometimes thinking I saw a shadow or having a feeling of not being alone. But being a kid, I just shrugged it off as nothing. My granddad passed in 2016. Hit me very hard as I was close to him. My nan was struggling to cope alone, so I moved in the next year. Now, I've always had a fascination with the spirit world, but myself have never really seen anything. But my nan has mentioned her events that she's witnessed in this flat, such as a town crier, a girl in a Victorian dress, and a very tall man in a bowler hat reading a newspaper. I also recall a time my granddad said he'd seen the little girl in the dress also, as well as a soldier walking into and out of what is now my bedroom. I myself have never seen anything physically. A few strange things have happened though, such as a phone disappearing completely, and my phone's moved from my bedside table to my TV stand, and I often hear my name being called from the living room, only to find my nan asleep, as it only ever happens at night. There is an odd feeling in this flat of loneliness and sorrow, but I'm unsure why. Still have no idea why I've never witnessed anything myself since moving in here. Kid ghost running through my house, etc., etc. I've been reticent to talk to anyone about it because it sounds like I'm going completely nuts, but I think there's a child ghost that appears sometimes in this house. On at least 4 occasions since we moved in, I've seen this kid run through the room. He's about 8 or 9 years old. He wears a 70s-era striped shirt, has brown hair and a bowl cut. Always laughing like he's running away from someone playing tag. First, I saw him upstairs. Then he ran across the hall and then nowhere to be found. Since he's run through my bedroom, disappearing into the master bath, downstairs living room, and my downstairs office. While none of us have ever seen him at the same time, my wife and one of my sons have reported similar events. The other day, we're sitting at the kitchen table. I thought one of my sons was across the room, like when you see somebody out of the corner of your eye. So I didn't look up. But then the cabinet flew open and several glasses fell out and shattered on the floor. Turned out my son had been upstairs the whole time. A few hours after we cleaned it up, an ornament fell off my Christmas tree and broke. Weird, but no biggie. But then, 5 minutes later, the tree fell over. Not gradually, it was like it'd been pushed. I was on the couch right in front of it when this happened and had a distinct feeling like somebody else was in the room right before the tree fell over. No one else was in the house. I have a very serious matter, and I'm fed up at this point. My name is Tyler. I promise every single word of what I'm saying here is true. I've lived in my house for about 4.5 years. There's always been little things that happen here and there, but it's been extreme for about a year straight now. There's a demon or a poltergeist in my house. As I type this right now, it's 2:20 a.m. Another case of me being awake after being roughed up in my sleep. Every night as I'm falling asleep, this thing torments me, and it's always right as I'm dozing off, like it doesn't want me to get any sleep. It pulls and pushes my hands and legs, twists my head from left to right. Feels like it puts gas in my nose when I'm sleeping. I wake up because of the reaction of breathing in gas that burns, vibrates my bed, kicks my bed, and pulls me and pushes me. Yanks my legs super hard and always right as I first fall asleep, like it's purposely tormenting me. I hear it walk through my hallway during the day, then slam my brother's door. It hissed at me once outside my bedroom door super loud before. It's literally so often and so much that I can't begin to try to tell everything. It's non-stop. I don't remember the last time I was able to just fall asleep without this damn thing smacking me around. Tonight I woke up after being pulled around and it felt like it put gas in my nose and did something where it felt like I was deaf for a few seconds. I swear to my Lord Jesus Christ, I'm not lying about any of it. It does stuff to other people in my house too, but they haven't had any physical contact. But they have stories for days, but man, I'm exhausted. I don't know if it's the house or me. I wish I could actually articulate to you guys how bad it really is. I think anybody else would probably scream and cry every day. It's true torment. Something I never ever thought was even real just a few years ago. Now it's literally my everyday existence. Sometimes I just sit in awe. I can't even believe this shit is my reality. Fucking hate it, man.